All right, let's begin here at the South. There's been some positive reaction to the Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana's maiden budget speech. Godongwana says government remains a matter of, in fact, government debt rather remains a matter of concern. He also says that this year government debt has reached 4.3 trillion rand and is projected to rise to 5.4 trillion rand over the medium term. Now, to provide some relief, though, to households, government says there will be no increases to the general fuel levy on petrol as well as diesel for 2022-2023. Did the budget, though, hit all the right notes? Let's find out from the labour sector. We speak to Mametlwe Sebeyi. He is the president of the General Industries Workers Union of South Africa. Zwelinzima Vavi, General Secretary of the South African Federation of Trade Unions, and Reuben Maleka, he's a spokesperson for the public servants. Thank you so much to you all for your time. Some have called it a well-balanced budget. Others say it was not bold enough, just overly cautious. I'll start with you, Mr. Sebeyi. Did the budget hit all the right notes?
No, not at all. I mean, what the budget reflects is a continuation of the war against the poor and the working class, cuts in terms of public sector wage bill that would mean a wage freeze over a whole medium-term period. That is very obvious. There is no serious allocation to upgrading of infrastructure. It is very clear that only very little will be allocated over the whole period of 3 years. 7.5 billion to upgrading public infrastructure like roads, clinics, schools, things that we need in this country, which are falling and collapsing everywhere before our eyes. We are saying that young people have been calling for free education. Now the minister allocate, of course, an increase in terms of allocation for higher education, but all of that goes to NEFSAS, which means young people are going to be enslaved through a debt that has meant many of them who have graduated university are trapped in a debt that means they are unable to plow back in their families, which have made enormous sacrifices to take them to higher education. None of the demands of the working class for a massive public works program to create jobs, to end unemployment, to make sure that we uplift many of the people from the poverty that is grinding has been, of course, resolved.
I'll come back to the jobs question as well as some social assistance in just a moment. But I'd like to also get your sense, Mr. Maleka, did it hit the right notes with the PSA?
First of all, we must acknowledge the fact that it seems as if the current minister is really moving away from the stance of the previous minister of austerity measures. It shows that it's got a way of trying to make sure that he capacitates the state. We welcome the fact, let me start with the good points. The first one is that he stopped bailing out the SOEs. Is going to also deal with the part of the fuel levy that is going to be part of the discussion. He's also, again, dealt with the increase of budget of key departments. Although he left out some of them, we welcome the police increase. But the question is that, will they utilize the budget? So on the bad side is that he failed to deal with the issue of public service salaries. We know that we still have pending court matter that still need to be funded. We are going into wage negotiations. He has not shown progress in making sure that there's enough budget. And also the issue of pension access. He has not dealt with the one, when are we going to access our pension money as public servants, in order to make sure that we can alleviate the pressure that came with COVID-19. So in a nutshell, we can see the positives. However, there's not much enough that is being done for us as public servants.
We'll get into the pensions conversation in just a moment, as he says that the government will in fact be guiding the trustees on how to be doing this, and it will be something that could potentially come into effect next month. But before we continue with this conversation, I'd like to bring you in, Mr. Vavi. For you, you're hearing some of your colleagues in the labour sector tonight talking about some positive points and not so positive points. We heard even some of the MPs having very views about whether or not it hit all the right notes. Some say no, some say yes. What does SAFTU say?
SAFTU says no. And our appeal to the PSA is please go back and crunch the numbers. Don't be fooled by the billions that you hear the minister pronouncing on. look at the impact of both inflation and population rate to come to a realization that in real terms, we're still in the framework of austerity. And no union worth its name and salt must celebrate the cutting of social expenditure to the poor and to its own members. So our appeal to the PSA, please go and read, crunch the numbers. You will come to the realization that this speech presented by Minister today is exactly the same speech that would have been presented by Derek Kiss in 1994, by Trevor Manuel, by Pravin Gordhan, by Malusi Gigaba, by Enoch Godongwana and Tito Mboweni. It's exactly the same work. The government is continuing with the theme that says our role is to create a conducive environment for business to prosper, to maximize their profits at the expense of the working class and the environment. And that we then hope that, against hope, by the way, if you look at the track record of the corporations in this country who today got another tax cut, how can the union celebrate that? They got another tax cut, having been contributing 52% at the peak of the corporate taxes in 1992, down to 27% now. They've showed absolutely nothing except the middle finger to the government. We are now facing a situation where there is actually an investment strike that have lasted for decades, with corporations hoarding a 1.4 trillion rands. And in the light of that the government is trying to create a conducive environment, government is simply deluding itself basically into believing that the private sector will suddenly wear a human face and stop maximizing profit and stop taking its money out of this economy, stop dodging taxes to a 50 billion rands every year, or stop looting the government procurement budget by 35 to 40%. So the public servants have been given another backhand. They're going to get absolutely nothing. We've made a call on government to increase the social expenditure. This is an austerity budget. When you take into consideration inflation and population growth, you will realize that we're actually facing a cut in expenditure.
Now, Mr. Maleka, the minister says that the public sector wage bill has, of course, this has been a thorny issue for quite some time. He says that though the fiscal outlook has improved, it's subject to some significant risks. And these include the pressures from the public sector wage bill itself. I wonder, what does this then mean, for negotiations? Because public servants tonight, as you say, are not really happy around the fact that there's still no word on that increase.
Yes, of course. The public sector, if you look at it, the definition of a public sector, they include all spheres of government, the SOEs, the municipalities. They are not specific to the public service. Because if we now come back to the public service where we are saying the public servants have been shortchanged for quite some time, for many years, including in 2020, where we have not received an increase. That's where we are saying as public servants that we need to get the minister that is serious about budgeting for public servants. And we also acknowledge the fact that the minister had our call that do not increase income tax, do not increase VAT, do not increase fuel levy. And that is exactly what he did. And therefore, that does not mean that as public servants we are totally happy about what the minister did. We need, as public servants, as we be studying negotiations in the coming month of March, that we have serious negotiations, not just for the minister to allocate the amount that he has already allocated and believe that is part of negotiations. Because negotiations, they would not even know what is our demand. Because we come from the basic of saying we are influenced by the current environment. If ESCOM could make a demand of 20.5%, and obviously, we have seen where the Minister of Labour came from in sectoral determination, giving 6%. So all those are kinds of direction or pointers to us as public servants of saying, what will be the demand that will be adequate to make sure that we are able to sustain our lives, and we are not going to compromise in our demands. will ensure that public servants are put in a position that they're able to afford and they continue to live their life as public servants.
Are you able to share with us what would that demand would be?
Look, as we speak right now, as different unions in the PSABC, we are busy consulting our demand, and we believe that as soon as we are ready to table them, we'll obviously come back, we can tell you exactly what will be the demand. But we can assure you, there's nothing that is below inflation. There's something that has to mitigate the effect of increases in terms of also ESCOM, which is going to come up with a huge cost. So we are not going to just simply say, look at inflation. We're going to look at all the impact that has on public servants and come up with a better demand that we're going to table during the course of March.
All right, Mr. Sebeyi, let me come to you. I mean, no tax increase, no fuel levy increase, some kind of reprieve, one would say, for the public sector. But I'm listening also to Mr. Maleka talking about how, there's still going to be the demands that are put on the table in order to ensure that there is some kind of an increase that is then given to some of the public servants in order to try and alleviate some of the pressures that they find themselves in. I wonder if you're looking at today and what has been announced, are you confident that government may move a needle here and meet the workers somewhere?
In fact, I'm shocked by the attitude of Comrade Maleka, to be quite frank, because if he does not read that this budget is a declaration of a political and class war on the public servants, I don't know what other evidence does he require, because 1.8 increase, in a public sector wage bill over a period of 3 years. What does it mean if not reaffirmation of wage freezes over the entire period that they've already, declared before? Now, secondly, on the issue of personal income, right? We want the rich to be taxed more, because how else are we going to fund commitment to make sure that this government deliver on essential public services, to ensure that schools are built, clinics, roads, and all of that public infrastructure that we need, but also to resolve the issues of unemployment. That they've only allocated just 76 billion for job creation in an economy which has been shedding jobs on industrial scale. We are sitting with 12.5 million, long queue of the unemployed, right? What we need, and I think this is a thing that we have to recognize, that we're going to continue to be tinkering with the system when the very fabric of society is beginning to tear apart, precisely because society is imploding at all levels. Public services are collapsing. Unemployment is skyrocketing. Levels of poverty are deepening in a way that is becoming unbearable and is reflected, in the explosion of, xenophobic, gender-based violence as families are disintegrating. What we want is a fundamental transformation of society. And the fact that comrades in PSA do not recognize that problem. Certainly this government is living its own world. The reality is that the working class must begin to discuss what political alternative, because the ANC, insofar as I'm concerned, and this budget confirms it, is impotent in confronting the impending economic implosion of the country, the social catastrophe that is levels of poverty, of unemployment, the widening inequality, the hunger in our communities, and of course, failures of the government at all levels. What we need, and that's the reason that, as Giusa, but I also know that our federation has made a demand, nationalize the commanding hires of the economy. Capitalism is incapable of resolving the crisis. We need a different system. And we are saying that bring the banks, the mines, the factories, and of course, all the commanding hires of the economy under public ownership, and on the basis of the democratic planning of the economy, we can make sure that the vast resources that are there in the economy can be rolled out in a form of a public works program to create jobs on for millions of working class people and youth whose whole future, the future of the whole generation, is being wasted by this crisis.
And Mr. Vavi, one of the things that, of course, is clear from this budget is that the Social Relief of Distress grant has been extended, and we heard this as well from the State of the Nation address, but still no word on the basic income grant. National Treasury saying that it is still considering proposals around a universal basic income grant, but it says that this cannot be done in a way that is fiscally irresponsible. I wonder, though, what does this delay in finalizing this particular grant actually mean for the poor?
Class arrogance. They are extremely assured by the fact that they've succeeded to fragment the labor movement, which is currently very weak, in particular in the public service. There's no collective bargaining, by the way. The comrades in the public sector must accept, wake up and smell the coffee, comrades. The collective bargaining long ended in the public service. There's now collective begging. And that's why the government can willy-nilly just refuse to implement an agreement in 2020 and give public servants 1.5% in the next year plus a few thousand rands to bribe them and silence them. That's exactly what is going to happen this year and until 2024, unless the PSA accept that they are being slaughtered by the government that they may laugh. They are taking such a serious pounding, and they need unity, and they need to join hands with other workers in the private sector and resist a total onslaught on the living standards of the working class as a whole, as reflected in this budget. Now, we were marching in the streets of Cape Town, how we wish that the PSA and FEDUSA and all other federations would have been part of that march to demand a basic income grant and a wealth tax for the wealthy South Africans who 1% of owns more than 50% of the wealth of all of the population of this country. We were kicked in our mouth. We are told that the insulting 350 rands per month, just imagine, 350 rands a month won't buy you a loaf of bread in a day. That's what we are being told is an intervention, whilst the government boldly tells us, and the sycophants and those that are openly backing the capitalist class were clapping hands when the minister tells us that in 2023 it would have reached an equilibrium, meaning that it will not have a debt to borrow and all of that. At the time when we have July last year, that showed us a window of what we are waiting for in our country if you look at the levels of poverty, deprivation, in particular amongst black people. And that's the crisis the government is refusing to embrace. It gives us a left rhetoric, but all of its actions from the president to the previous presidents, I know that is opportunism now to say, oh, it's about Ramaphosa turning to the right. The turn to the right started in December of 1995 when Nelson Mandela told us that privatization is a fundamental policy of the ANC that is not up for negotiations. That is happening for 27 years. In 27 years, we now have the highest unemployment rate in the world. We have the worst youth unemployment rate in the world. We are the most unequal society in the whole world, and we have just below 70% of our population trapped in degrading levels of poverty. And the face of all of those people is black people, and that's what matters more. The very same people who were promised a better life for all in 1995.
Now, Mr. Maleka, your colleagues are calling on you to wake up and smell the coffee, as they say, that there is nothing positive going into that collective bargaining. In fact, they're now even calling it collective begging and also saying that this is a wage freeze. I wonder what is your response to the two of them?
Yeah, thank you very much. You know, when came in today in this debate, I thought that we were going to debate the budget speech, but now I think that we are actually in a scope where we are debating, you know, the political, you know, climate, and obviously some have already mentioned the issue of the ANC. I mean, really speaking, I don't think that as the Public Servants Association, we are here to be debating how one can actually remove the ANC in government. We are debating the budget. And I'm not going to go into the scope where I'm going to be debating the issue of the government of the day, whether ANC is doing good or not. I'm not in politics. We are a trade union, we are political, and we are here to debate the budget speech. So two of my colleagues, obviously, you can see their interest and their political inclination. And unfortunately, they have to criticize what I'm saying because I'm not taking what they want to hear from me. And obviously, as PSA, we are ready to negotiate. We'll be in the PSABC. The unions that will be in the PSABC will not be begging, will be bargaining. And we are ready to bargain as come the month of March.
All right, and we're almost out of time. I'm going to ask you all to be very brief on this particular point because he talks about corruption being a major blight in our country and talking about how, of course, this is a low point. But at the same time, you look at the conversations around the SOEs themselves. They're still going to provide turnaround plans, and there's still no plans really about how the rationalization or even consolidation of some of the SOEs that are not performing is going to go. I wonder what has been your reaction to this, and I'll give you 30 seconds each. I'll start with you, Mametlwe.
Maleka is not in politics, but politics are into him. Because the reality is, I can say with confidence, there is no way that the rank and file of PSA are going to agree to years of wage freezes. That is not going to happen because the public servant have been paying the price. Secondly, this budget refused to respond to the crisis that we have mentioned. And there are other crises. There is a deepening ecological crisis of climate change. This system, this budget does not even begin to respond. How do you put a program to respond to that? But most importantly, we are saying that the disintegration of society as reflected by levels of poverty, levels of unemployment, but also the barbarism of xenophobia and all of that calls for a fundamental change in a policy direction. We think ANC is incapable of it. We think that the working class in this country requires a political party that can be able to make sure that we put the working class not only in political but in economic power through a nationalization of the commanding heads of the economy on the basis of a democratic control and management.
Your 30 seconds is up. I'll move to you, Mr. Vavi, very briefly. No solid plan about how this, the underperforming SOEs are going to be dealt with. Your reaction?
No overall economic program to take us out of the malaise of the past 27 years. It doesn't exist. No attempt to say that we have messed up. We've messed up the state-owned enterprises. We have destroyed them. And the only thing we hear today is a statement that says we will defund them or we will throw to them some few peanuts. But they will not get out of the hole that we ourselves push Eskom, Dinel, Brasa, Transnet, you name them all, SAA, XA Express. We push them to where they are, and that we're now refusing to fund them so that our people get very, very angry. And when they are very, very angry, we will then sell these things to our friends in the international market, from which our partners, our wives, our husbands will be the shareholders. That's the statement. That's where we are going to, unfortunately.
All right. In 10 seconds, Reuben.
Yeah, we are going to be tabling demands come March, and then obviously I know that Sub to Comrade Vavi will be part of that debate, and I'm sure that is not going to also be part of the begging. We're going to bargain, and we're looking forward that we build the capacity of the state, because obviously we cannot beg off at this state. As public servants, we require the state that can work for the people. We require the state that can deal with corruption and crime. Therefore, we as public servants and as the union, we are ready and our members are ready to make sure that they deliver service to the public, and we also make sure that they also get what they deserve as public servants.
Thank you so much to you all for your time, and we'll keep tabs then on those negotiations to see if in fact they are getting off on the right kind of start, as some of course are not so confident tonight. But thank you so much to you all for your time. That was Mametlwe Sebeyi. He's the president of the General Industries Workers Union of South Africa. Zwelinzima Vavi, General Secretary of the South African Federation of Trade Unions, as well as Reuben Maleka. He's the spokesperson for the Public Servants Association.